All righty, so let's go look at Isaiah 23. I want to read the whole chapter, but we're going to pick up our comments in verse 15, close to the end. It's only got 18 verses, so we're in the last three. So this is an oracle concerning Tyre and Sidon. You remember this whole oracle against the nations. There's been, counting this one, 10 of them, and started with Babylon and then continued through kind of in a crisscrossing pattern, different countries that were neighboring to Judah or Israel. And so now we're getting to the other end of uh, the last bit of those countries, which is the country here is Phoenicia, but the cities are Tyre and Sidon that are being talked about. So the oracle concerning Tyre: Wail, O ships of Tarshish, for Tyre is laid waste without house or harbor. From the land of Cyprus it is revealed to them, be still, O inhabitants of the coast, the merchants of Sidon who cross the sea have filled you. And on many waters your revenue was the grain of Shihor, the harvest of the Nile. You were the merchant of the nations. Be ashamed, O Sidon, for the sea has spoken, the stronghold of the sea, saying, I have neither labored nor given birth, I have neither reared young men nor brought up young women. When the report comes to Egypt, they will be in anguish over the report about Tyre. Cross over to Tarshish, wail, O inhabitants of the coast. Is this your exultant city, whose origin is from days of old, whose feet carried her to settle far away? Who has purposed this against Tyre, the bestower of crowns, whose merchants were princes, whose traders were the honored of the earth? The Lord of hosts has purposed it to defile the pompous pride of all glory, to dishonor all the honored of the earth. Cross over your land like the Nile, O daughter of Tarshish. There is no restraint any more. He has stretched out his hand over the sea, has shaken the kingdoms. The Lord has given command concerning Canaan to destroy its strongholds. And he said, You will no more exult, O oppressed virgin daughter of Sidon. Arise, cross over to Cyprus, even there you will have no rest. Behold, the land of the Chaldeans. This is the people that was not. Assyria destined it for wild beasts. They erected their siege towers, they stripped her palaces bare, they made her a ruin. Wail, O ships of Tarshish, for your stronghold is laid waste. In that day Tyre will be forgotten for 70 years, like the days of a king. At the end of 70 years it will happen to Tyre as in the song of the prostitute. Take a harp, go about the city, O forgotten prostitute. Make sweet melody, sing many songs that you may be remembered. At the end of 70 years the Lord will visit Tyre, and she will return to her wages and will prostitute herself with all the kingdoms of the world on the face of the earth. Her merchandise and her wages will be holy to the Lord. It will not be stored or hoarded, but her merchandise will supply abundant food and fine clothing for those who dwell before the Lord. So I think, you probably have a good handle on what's going on here. Just to summarize briefly, Tyre, a merchant city, a great merchant city in Phoenicia, has a sister city, Sidon, a little bit higher up on the coast there. This is principally about Tyre, even though Sidon is also mentioned, and the judgment is on Tyre for its pride, its arrogance, and its basically self-reliance, right? And a lot of what the prophecy talks about or mentions is the reaction to the judgment of Tyre by the other lands that had traded with Tyre. Tyre is personified here as a prostitute who's prostituting herself and trading her wares with all the other nations who are also thereby personified. And the nations that have been trading with her, Tarshish, Egypt, etc., are wailing, they're in torment, they're in anguish. Uh, Tarshish is shown as, Tarshish was fairly close. They would go to Cyprus and then from Cyprus to Tyre, and they're portrayed as, you know, not having a harbor when they get there. There's nothing left, and so they're wailing over that. So we see economic dependability of these other nations on the trade with Tyre for their own economy, and so this has kind of a chain reaction of economic chaos in the area. That's kind of what's been being talked about. I wanted to mention one thing about verse 11. It says, second part of that, the Lord has given command concerning Canaan to destroy its strongholds. I haven't checked this to see if any translations don't use the word Canaan there, but that Canaan is the word that is translated as merchant in other places in the Bible. And of course, this whole chapter is about Tyre being this merchant city. And so just wanted to mention that. The
Well,
Chaldean, yeah, go ahead.
The King James I have does say Merchant City.
Okay, merchant city instead of Canaan, right? So I suspected that somebody might have done that. And it's also, this is the same word in, where is it? I think it's the end of Malachi. Let's see. Hope I'm right about that. I'm not right about that. I'll find it. Never mind. I'm not going to be able to find it because the ESV doesn't translate it Canaanite. Anyway, there's a passage that says there will be no Canaanite found in the house of the Lord, but most modern translations translate that as merchant. And okay, so the mention of Babylon or the Chaldeans, I think that's verse 13, is just to say that even this up and coming nation can't escape judgment. If you think you can escape judgment, you're wrong. Tyre. Now, the instrument of God's judgment on most of the nations that have been mentioned in the oracle, in all of the oracles, actually, in the 10 oracles against the nations, God's instrument was Assyria in most of these cases. And then there were further, what some people call fulfillments that took place when Babylon rose to power and then revisited these same areas and, reconquered most of them or all of them if they were still in existence. And then later on in the Greek period, Tyre gets completely obliterated by Alexander the Great. But the closest reference, the idea that what's in mind here is the coming Assyrian invasion into the land. It's going to devastate all these countries, and this is a picture to these people and a lesson to God's people that God is in control of all the nations and that we should, as his people, not be same message always, right? Don't be afraid of what's happening in the world, and don't rejoice because you think you got the right politician, in the White House or on the throne, because it's God who controls all the destinies of all the nations, and he's doing it for his own glory. And so, since God is doing it for his own glory, we should be very careful about not glorifying men and saying, I put my hope in this government, or I put my hope in this revolutionary group, or whatever it is. We don't want to hope in these things because it is God who would be glorified. So we want to glorify him by trusting him and hoping in him. And that's...
May I ask you a question?
Of course. Go ahead, Catherine.
You're in verse 13 of Isaiah 23, and you've already referred to the Chaldeans and Assyria. I want to know if you approve of this cross-reference, because in my Bible, Assyria, of course, we know is God's instrument. But it also says that Assyria was appointed it for desert creatures. They erected their siege towers. They stripped its palaces. They made it a ruin, which sent me back to Isaiah chapter 10, verse 5. Woe to Assyria, the rod of my anger, and the staff in whose hands is my indignation. Going on to verse 6. I send it against the godless nation and commission it against the people of my fury, to capture booty and to seize plunder and to trample them down like mud in the streets, which I believe you referred to as Israel. Do you agree with that referral?
Yeah.
from Isaiah 23? Okay.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay, thank you.
So
Thank you.
Assyria, you'll remember in the bigger context of what's happening in Isaiah, not only are they the aggressor who's, actually attacking all of Israel's and Judah's neighbors, but they're actually the threat to Israel and Judah, or sometimes the place of refuge that Israel and Judah seek to have by sending them tribute, stripping the temple. If you're in Judah, you send gold from the temple, you send tribute and all that. And then we already talked about how the political leaders, the kings of Judah, kind of went back and forth. They were pro-Assyrian, and then that king he died, and
Hmm.
son comes in his place, and he's anti-Assyrian, and so the politics get rearranged. The fact that the politics keeps getting rearranged should indicate that the solution is not politics, right? It just
Hmm.
let's try this. Oh, that didn't work. Let's try the opposite. Well, that didn't work. Um, so that's how that goes. But so Assyria is the big problem in the area and the big instrument that God is using. And so it's a problem if you're not trusting in the Lord. It is, the we already talked about this in the Valley of Vision when they're standing on the roofs looking over and they're seeing Assyria approach the city. That that should make them trust in the Lord. They
Hmm.
should stop trusting in everything else and trust in the Lord. That's that's what seeing the disaster coming should do for God's people. And but they don't, they just go on and party. Um, so anyway, so that's what's being talked about in the wider picture is the Assyrian conquest of this area and God's use of Assyria. And in Isaiah 10, which has already been referenced by Catherine, at the end of that chapter, God says he's going to turn after he's done with his work, after he's done with his work of judgment, using Assyria for that. He's going to turn and judge Assyria because of their pride and arrogance and thinking that it was their own idea and for their own gain. So it's
Yeah.
just very consistent with the message that's been really hammered into God's people through Isaiah's ministry. So, okay, so I want to move into verse 18 now, or verse 15 now, and start talking about that. So 15, in that day, Tyre will be forgotten for 70 years. So in the day that Tyre is judged by God via the Assyrians, then Tyre will go, it says, be forgotten for 70 years, like the days of one king. And 70 years here is being used as a kind of a round number. It's 70 years means 70 years, but it also is a number that's used for in a lot of places as for about a generation or about the lifetime of like here as a king, something like that. Um, Even in the very famous passage in Daniel 9, the 70s are being used in a symbolic way rather than a literal counting way. Um, so in that day, Tyre will be forgotten for 70 years, like the days of one king. And at the end of the 70 years, it will happen to Tyre as in the song of the prostitute. Take a harp, go about the city, O forgotten prostitute. Make sweet melody, sing many songs that you may be remembered. So this is probably a song that was around at the time that's being quoted here. That's what most of the commentators think. And it's about a prostitute who's now really old, but wants to return to her acts of prostitution. And so she's out there singing songs, trying to entice people, and so this is what's being used to talk about Tyre. At the end of 70 years, verse 17, the Lord will visit Tyre, and she will return to her wages and will prostitute herself with all the kingdoms of the world on the face of the earth. Her merchandise and her wages will be holy to the Lord. It will not be stored or hoarded, but her merchandise will supply abundant food and fine clothing for those who dwell before the Lord. So this has a surprise ending. I mentioned it last week. It's surprising for a number of reasons. And, it's been pretty regular in the oracles that you get surprise endings. Like you get God's going to judge Cush, and then at the end of the oracle, and Cush and Assyria and Egypt are all going to come to the Lord, that kind of thing. And so this is a surprise ending. She's going to return to her former position. That's what it means in verse 17. She will return to her wages and will prostitute herself with all the kingdoms of the world on the face of the earth. This means she'll return to her former position as a hub for commerce, as a trading port, and of some renown. And historically, what happens is Assyria basically destroys Tyre, and roughly 70 years later, the 70 years corresponding to the period of the Babylonian dominance of the area. So Babylon comes in, destroys Assyria, wipes out all these countries again. And during that period, Tyre is gone, pretty much. There's a city there, but it's not economically, it doesn't have any importance at all. But after the Babylonian exile of Judah and Israel, after the Babylonian kingdom is replaced by the Persian kingdom, Tyre rises back to prominence. And so that's what's being spoken of here. The 70-year period for Tyre is basically the period that corresponds with the Babylonian exile of Judea and Israel, or Judah and Israel. So, so I want to say something about the Lord's mercy. So Tyre had been sinning, for many generations. It's mentioned that Tyre is an ancient city in the text, and it was founded, I think, around 2500 BC, and it's now about 700 when Isaiah is delivering this, somewhere between 740 and 680. So it's been over, it's 1,000 years, almost 2,000 years. The people of Tyre have been sinning against the Lord, and the Lord is going to judge them, but not completely annihilate them. And he's going to, his judgment only lasts for the period where they are basically that 70 years. So it's, one generation where he judges them. So it's been very merciful. And then you have this phrase in verse 17, at the end of the 70 years, the Lord will visit Tyre. And that's interesting because sometimes the Lord visiting a place has to do with judgment, but the Lord's already done that with Tyre. And so this sounds like it's a different type of visitation. It doesn't sound like it's another judgment on Tyre. It sounds like it's a different type of visitation. And so that reminds us of the use in blessing. The Lord comes to visit in blessing. And we can see that in several places. I've got some of them listed. Genesis 21:1, first place. The Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did to Sarah as he had promised. This is about Isaac being born. The Lord had promised she would become pregnant and give birth to a son, and there he is. There's the Lord doing that, fulfilling his promise. So to visit Sarah here carries along with it this idea of the Lord blessing her by fulfilling his good word to her, not his word of judgment, but his word of blessing. Same thing in Genesis 50, 24 and 25. It says, and Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, but God will visit you and bring you up out of this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here. This is clearly a blessing, fulfillment of God's word type of situation, right? Exodus 4:31, same thing. Moses comes to the people. He explains to them, I've seen God. I met with God. There was this burning bush. God gave me this commission. He's heard your cries in slavery. He's come down to deliver you. This is what Moses tells them. And the people believed. And when they heard that the Lord had visited the people of Israel, that he had seen their affliction, they bowed their heads and worshiped. God visited them. And to them, what that means in the context here is God's heard their cries, and he's going to fulfill his earlier promises by being merciful to them and acting on and blessing them and acting on their behalf. Ruth 1:6, the same thing. And she arose with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab. Okay, so there was a well, anyway, for she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and given them food. So a famine had basically driven her there, and now the Lord's visited his people and given them food. So it's basically he visited his people. How did he do that? He gave them food in blessing. 1 Samuel 2:21. Indeed, the Lord visited Hannah, and she conceived and bore 3 sons and 2 daughters, and the boy Samuel grew in the presence of the Lord. So the Lord visited Hannah, giving her more children than the one that she was giving up by giving Samuel into the priesthood. So he blesses her. Isaiah 29:6. You'll be visited by the Lord with thunder and with earthquake and great noise, whirlwind, tempest, and the flame of a devouring fire. This is a description that corresponds with when when God gave the law. He's going to come down and speak to you. Um, Jeremiah 15:15. So this is a usage of where it's blessing to Jeremiah, but not blessing to the people whom the Lord is carrying out his judgment on, but it's blessing to Jeremiah, and he is the one who is visited. Oh Lord, remember me and visit me and take vengeance for me on my persecutors. In your forbearance, take me not away. Know that for your sake I bear reproach. Then Jeremiah 27:22, God says, they shall be carried to Babylon and remain there until the day when I visit them, declares the Lord. Then I will bring them back and restore them to this place. Jeremiah 29:10. For thus says the Lord, when 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will visit you, and I will fulfill to you my promise and bring you back to this place. This is pretty much a definition of God uh, visiting in this sense. He's going to fulfill his promise. And of course, visiting in judgment is also fulfillment, of his promise. But here he's talking about blessing. Jeremiah 32:5. And he shall take Zedekiah to Babylon. That is, Nebuchadnezzar will take Zedekiah, king of Judah, to Babylon, and there he shall remain until I visit him, declares the Lord. Though you fight against the Chaldeans, you shall not succeed. And then Luke 1:68. Blessed be the Lord God of Israel, for he has visited and redeemed his people. So, all of that to say that when we get to uh, verse 15 of Isaiah 23, at the end of 70 years, at the end of 70 years of judgment, the Lord will visit Tyre. He will bless her. That's the way I think you would want to understand it. And I think that's interpretation is borne out by what happens later in this passage, because in verse 18, right, her merchandise and her wages will be holy to the Lord. They will not be stored or hoarded, but her merchandise will supply abundant food and fine clothing for those who dwell before the Lord. So what is being said here in verses 15 or 17 through 18, 17, 18, is that the Lord, after this period of judgment upon Tyre, he will visit her. That is, he will come to Tyre in blessing, and that this coming to Tyre, this visitation of the Lord, will result in the merchandise and wages of Tyre being holy to the Lord and being used to supply food and clothing for those who dwell before the Lord. This raises a question about the legitimacy of this, as far as, is this something, I mean, what many people read that and think, oh, that's really weird, because they think about Deuteronomy 23, 17 and 18 says, none of the daughters of Israel shall be a cult prostitute, and none of the sons of Israel shall be a cult prostitute. You shall not bring a fee of a prostitute or the wages of a dog into the house of the Lord your God in payment for any vow, for both of these are an abomination to the Lord your God. So Deuteronomy 23:17 and 18 says, you shall not bring a fee, the fee of a prostitute or the wages of a dog into the house of the Lord your God, because that would be an abomination. The way that this money was earned, the way that this offering was obtained is repugnant. And so it's an abomination. And so when people, you can see that there appears to possibly be a conflict, right? If Tyre remains unconverted, and her wages are garnished, somebody raises a tariff or something, and their wages are taken, and everything that they earned as a prostitute is then devoted to the Lord for those who dwell before him. This is a violation of the Deuteronomy law. So there have been a couple of different ways people have approached this. One is to say that, to point out the obvious, Tyre's not really a prostitute, but is only being described as one. And so the prohibition does not apply. I don't know what you think about that. I would be interested in hearing. What I think about that is, yes, it's true. Tyre's really not a prostitute. Tyre's a city. And so for that matter, Tyre has no wages. Cities don't get paid. If you want to be that literal about it, I think actually, so my thought about that is that this explanation, trying to explain the apparent contradiction, is not useful. I don't think the fact that Tyre is not really a prostitute, but is a city, has anything to do with the way that her character is being described and how God looks at them. Is Tyre a prostitute? Technically, no. Does the Lord consider her to be a prostitute? Yes. Would the Lord consider her uh, wages, the things she's got by whatever commerce she's doing, to be the wages of a prostitute? Yes, he's already said that. So I think that the conflict still stands, right? Try to if you try to have a solution that way. Does that make sense? Did I talk myself in a circle? That makes sense, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the second option is that the people of Tyre are converted. That maybe all of them, maybe some of them, but people in Tyre who were engaging in this activity, which was characterized by the Lord as prostitution, they're converted, and they then stop doing what they were doing and start doing something in honoring to the Lord, and the wages then are from that. And so that, and then to add to that, I would also say that the people bringing in their wages or their treasures is a picture of people giving their most valuable. They're bringing their most valuable thing, and they're submitting it to the Lord. And isn't that what Isaiah has been about? You value Egypt, you value this political alliance, you value what you can gain from this, or you're afraid of losing this other thing that you value. Give those to the Lord. Just give it to the Lord, right? You must value the Lord greater than whatever you value that's not the Lord. The Lord must be the chief desire of your heart and the one that you honor. And so we have all these passages in the Bible. We'll read some of them in a minute here about the nations coming and bringing their treasures. Well, what were their former treasures? Their power, their position, their trade, their alliances with other nations, things like that. That's what their treasures were. They're not talking about silver and gold, unless that literally is the treasure. But we're talking about basically position and relationships. So all of these things must be brought to the Lord. So let's look at Psalm 45, verse 12. And anybody who has anything to say, just talk. I'm generally not going to stop. So just talk and then I'll stop. But um,
I have something to say.
okay, good.
So last week we talked a lot about Tyre's pride
Hmm.
in its own self-sufficiency,
Hmm.
and that's their treasure.
Yeah.
They're bringing their pride and submitting it to the Lord.
Yep. Yep. And another major theme in Isaiah, right? The Lord will exalt you if you humble yourself, and will humble you if you exalt yourself. And so humility is greatly valued by the Lord.
And so it's a very good exercise to think about. Each person should think about what is it that they treasure, that they need to bring to the Lord.
Yeah, exactly. Good. Very good application. Thank you.
Well, something too that I've heard in regard to the harlots and Tyre was that the harlots sang to draw attention to themselves, and like the harlots, the people of Tyre were invited to sing songs to draw attention to their earlier prosperity, and so the harlot is mentioned at this time was a musician as well as one selling their body, and and so this is speaking of Tyre as a city as if it were a harlot. Not that it is a harlot, but as if it were a harlot. Now those are the things I know, and it's because Tyre had been selfish and worldly, originally interested in the things of God. So those
Hmm.
are the things I've heard. So you can uh, clarify that if you need to, or elaborate on that.
Mm. Thanks for saying that. Yeah, the only thing I hadn't mentioned or brought up was I mean, obviously I said she's got this song and she's singing it. Um, yeah, I'm not sure how strong the connection is there would be between, as a profession, being a musician. I don't think there's any connection there. I just think it's a picture of somebody using available media to make themselves known, uh, but not, yeah, not like her vocation is prostitution, and she uses this song to promote herself. It's like an advertisement. Yeah. Um,
Mm.
so let's look at. Oh, Becky, go ahead. I'm glad so many people have things to say. This is great.
So, well, this is, I'm sure that I'm dumbing this down to the basics, but when I look at 18 and it says that her profit and her earnings will be set apart for the Lord, that they will not be stored up or hoarded, and her profits will go to those who live before the Lord for abundant food and fine clothes. So I look at that, and what keeps coming back to me is the Lord is taking what somebody meant for evil and turning it to good.
Hmm.
And I know it says that someplace at least once in the Bible that you cannot defeat the Lord and his intentions.
Right.
So even if you go out of your way to be, you know, despicable in your lifestyle, he will take that and make it good for his kingdom. And so that when I see that her profits will go to those who live before him, I think of all the poor, the needy, the missionaries that they're not profiting from the prostitute, um, but they are being blessed by the Lord through what has been done for as evil.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a main, so somebody has called it irony. It's ironic that what people do against the Lord, or what they intend to do, is used against them and for the Lord's advantage. Like they crucified Jesus. They intend to, and so that turns out really,
The
really bad.
ultimate evil.
Ultimate evil, right? Turns out not good for them and good for lots of millions and millions of other people, right? That the Lord brings good out of evil, and that's the ultimate expression of that principle right there. So there's this kind of this ironic um, reversal type of thing that goes on, right? You humble yourself, you'll be exalted. This is an ironic reversal that there's a way that seems right to a man, so I'm going to do this because it's going to get me good things, and I'll, prosper in my life, and the end results in death, right? This is ironic. There's a there's the Lord, basically what the Bible continually teaches, mostly by historical example, but also summarized a lot by those statements that I quoted, like in the Proverbs and the Psalms, is that not only does the Lord use everything for his own glory, but that he brings about his purposes in ways that are completely the opposite of the way that we might do it. They look like whatever the Lord is doing looks like it can't possibly, result in him achieving his purpose. And then he does it. He makes the final move, and you just go, "Wow, that was amazing! How did that happen?" Uh, and so, what that tells us in relation to, say, the book of Isaiah, is that you're not supposed to trust appearances. You're supposed to trust God's word. God says, this is going to work out for your good. I'm sending you into exile. It's going to work out for your good. So go into exile, you know. Um, and they look and they go, this looks terrible. This isn't what God promised. This is no, it is what I promised, and I will bring about my promises. And you can't see it, and you don't need to see it. And Paul says in, I think it's First Corinthians, but it might be Second Corinthians. We walk by faith and not by sight. And he
Mm-hmm.
says it. He says it as it's in a parentheses, right? It's just kind of a under his breath type of thing in the Corinthian letter. But that's what the entire Old Testament teaches: is the way to receiving the good things that God has promised is to trust Him during the hard things. This is what Jesus says, right, about in Lazarus and Dives, that the rich man and Lazarus, right? Luke 16. He says, well, Lazarus in his life, he didn't have anything but hard stuff, but he's going to have good stuff in the afterlife. And the rich man, he had his good things, already had his good things. He's not going to have any good things in the afterlife. So it's a kind of ironic, right? You look at the people who look to be successful and you go, well, in the end, they're not the people who are successful. The people who are successful are those who, and it's a general observation. It's not a strict thing. The Bible doesn't teach that rich people all go to hell or anything like that, but that there is a danger, a real danger in evaluating your circumstances without taking the Lord into consideration. The very best,
Right.
yeah, the very best response. God says to Amos, Amos, what do you see? And Amos goes, Lord. That's the best. That's the best response, right? In all of our circumstances, is
Mm-hmm.
this is, what this means, Lord, and you know what you're doing. And I know
Right.
what I see, but it's not even worth mentioning, you know? So, that's yeah, really good observation there about the irony. Um, so Tyre is mentioned in Psalm 45. I want to read the whole Psalm. And since we do have 10 minutes, so we'll read the whole Psalm here. And my heart overflows with a pleasing theme. I address my verses to the king. My tongue is like the pen of a ready scribe. You are the most handsome of the sons of men. Grace is poured upon your lips. Therefore, God has blessed you forever. Gird your sword on your thigh, O mighty one, in your splendor and majesty. In your majesty, ride out victoriously for the cause of truth and meekness and righteousness. Let your right hand teach you awesome deeds. I just want to mention something that occurred to me. The psalm it's addressed to the king, but the king himself is the type and the shadow of the greater king, right? He is the Lord Jesus. It's a picture of the Lord Jesus. And this psalm is about the Lord Jesus. And verse 3, he's told to put his sword on his thigh in his splendor and his majesty. And in verse 4, to ride out victoriously for the cause of truth and meekness and righteousness, and to do mighty and awesome deeds. And I think this is repictured in Revelation 19 of the rider on the white horse with the sword, right? But it's coming out of his mouth there. But he's going out to establish in the cause of truth and righteousness, and he's going to bring his word to bear on the earth. And it's submission, bringing everybody into submission under him. Verse 5, your arrows are sharp in the heart of the king's enemies. The peoples will fall under you. Your throne, O God, is forever and ever. Now, this is really interesting. If this is about the Davidic king, that's blasphemy, right? This is because he's talking about the king on the throne. He's calling him God. This is really about Jesus. And as the book of Hebrews quotes this and applies it to Jesus, we have even more confirmation of that. Your throne, O God, is forever and ever. The scepter of your kingdom is a scepter of uprightness. You have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore, God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness beyond your companions. Your robes are all fragrant with myrrh and aloes and cassia. From ivory palaces, stringed instruments make you glad. Daughters of kings are among your ladies of honor. At your right hand stands the queen in gold of Ophir. Hear, O daughter, and consider, and incline your ear. Forget your people in your father's house, and the king will desire your beauty. Since he is your Lord, bow to him. The people of Tyre will seek your favor with gifts, the riches of the people. All right, so the queen is the church, the bride of Christ, right?
Mm-hmm.
She is the daughter who's being told to forget her people in her father's house, right? A reference back to Genesis, and to bow to the king who is her Lord. And so verse 12, really interesting, right? The people of Tyre will seek your favor with gifts, the riches of the people. Very interesting. They're going to come, the people of Tyre. All glorious is the princess in her chamber, with robes interwoven with gold. In many colored robes she is led to the king, with her virgin companions following behind her. With joy and gladness they are led along as they enter the palace of the king. In place of your fathers shall be your sons. You will make them princes in all the earth. I will cause your name to be remembered in all generations. Therefore nations will praise you forever and ever. So obviously not about the Davidic king. You get about halfway through and you go, wait a sec, did the subject change? It's always been the same subject. And here we have Tyre as a representative of the nations seeking the favor of the bride and the king. So Tyre is coming with gifts, right, to the people of God and is seeking favor. So this is a humbling of Tyre is pictured here, and the bringing in of gifts to the glory of God. So that's Psalm 45:12. If we look at Isaiah 18:7, we see another nation bringing tribute to the Lord. And so this is a string of passages about nations bringing tribute. This is Cush. And we read this and talked about it at the time, but it says, at that time, tribute will be brought to the Lord of hosts from a people tall and smooth, from the people feared near and far, a nation mighty and conquering, whose land the rivers divide, to Mount Zion, the place of the name of the Lord of hosts. So they're going to come and bring tribute. And this is going to be blended later on in other passages about, with passages about salvation. So it's not just they're unconverted and they're just coming by to pay tribute and give some honor so that maybe the Lord will not destroy them. This is a salvation picture. So, we already read Isaiah 45. No, did we? No, we didn't. Isaiah 45:14. We'll read that. It's about even more people. Thus says the Lord, the wealth of Egypt and the merchandise of Cush. So Cush has already been mentioned in chapter 18. And the Sabians, men of stature, shall come over to you and be yours. Talking to Judah after the exile. Going to restore them. And now these other nations are going to come and be theirs. They shall come over to you and be yours. They shall follow you. They shall come over in chains and bow down to you. They will plead with you, saying, surely God is in you, and there's no other, no God besides him. So they've rejected all of their gods. They've, repented of their idolatry, and they're coming and bowing down and saying, we want to find God. He's with you. Tell us about God.
I have
And
a
they bring.
question.
Yeah, Catherine.
You just read from Psalm 45, verse 12,
Mm-hmm.
which is a picture of Tyre bringing gifts to God.
Mm-hmm.
My Bible, because it mentions Tyre, my Bible sent me to Psalm 87, verse 4, which is entitled The Privileges of Citizenship in Zion. And verse 4 says this, I shall mention Rahab in Babylon among those who know me. Behold, Philistia and Tyre with Ethiopia. This one was born there. Would that, in your opinion, fall under the same definition of what you gave us in Psalm
Yes.
45:12?
Yep. Yep.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So just to read that again, Psalm 87, verse 4. I'm going to start in verse 1 because it's actually only
Okay.
7 verses. We'll just read it.
Right.
Psalm 87,
Great.
on the holy mount stands the city he founded. These are both big themes in Isaiah, right? The mountain of the Lord, Mount Zion, all the nations flow to it. And the city, in the very next section of Isaiah that we're going to read, the city is metaphor for either the world in some cases or for God's holy city. So you got the city of the world and the city of God. Um, on the holy mount stands the city he founded. The Lord loves the gates of Zion more than all the dwelling places of Jacob. Glorious things of you are spoken, O city of God. Among those who know me, I mentioned Rahab and Babylon. So Rahab there would be Egypt. Rahab is used in Jeremiah for Egypt. So among those who know me, I mentioned Rahab and Babylon. Babylon showing up in that list is really interesting. Behold, Philistia and Tyre with Cush. This one was born there, they say. And of Zion it shall be said, this one and that one were born in her. For the Most High himself will establish her. The Lord records as he registers the peoples. This one was born there. Singers and dancers alike say, all my springs are in you. So this is a wonderful psalm showing that the Zion, the true city of God, the Zion of God, uh, the city that descends, the new Jerusalem out of heaven, will be filled with the peoples, with the nations. And yeah, when I was a younger Christian, maybe this happened to all of you. I encountered several times in my reading and in talking to people and listening to sermons and things like that, that this inclusion of the Gentiles is a new thing. It's a New Testament thing. It's nowhere in the Old Testament. And as I've been so many times with so many other issues, it just baffles me how anybody can say that. It's like so clear.
Yeah,
that
It
that the
is.
inclusion of the Gentiles is not new.
Right.
This was God's plan the whole time, right? He chose Israel as a nation not because they were big or powerful or wonderful, but because they could be a light to the nations. Deuteronomy 7 says that so that the nations would see and say, what other country, what other nation has such great laws? What other nation has such a great God? But they failed. They failed in that. And that's the history of the Old Testament, is they failed. And Jesus comes, he's the new Israel. He does it right. And people from all the world come to Jesus because they go, what other God is so just and merciful and holy and righteous and wonderful as the God of the Christians, as Jesus and the triune God. So we're going to come to him. This is what the nations say. And that was just what Israel was supposed to do. They were to be that light, and they weren't. But Jesus is the light. God exalts him, and he is the light. He is the light of the world. And so they come to him. So, yeah, wonderful psalm. Thank you for mentioning that. I'm surprised it's not in my list, actually. I don't see it anywhere on the page. So I'm going to just type it in there, and so that I have it on the list for the next time I need it. So we've come to 10:31. Does anybody have any other final comments or questions?
No.
Well, the cities that were mentioned there, Philistine, Tyre, and Ethiopia, those were the countries that were originally opposed to the religion of the Jews, right?
Yes, not originally. I mean, they are. I'd say it like this: they are the names of the prominent countries that were antagonistic to the Jews at the time that the psalm was written. And so they're
Okay.
historically, as we're reading in Isaiah, at that time, in Isaiah's time, most of these nations that are being listed were antagonistic problems for the Jewish people. And so in our day, we would read it not, we don't want to just read it this way. Oh, people from Egypt and people from Philistia and Tyre and Ethiopia. That's literally what it says, but you could read it like this. Among those who know me, I mentioned the United States, Russia, Ukraine, China. You could just do that
Mm-hmm.
because who are the enemies of God's people? Everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
All over the world,
Mm-hmm.
wherever God's people are scattered,
Right,
right?
right.
So that's how you would read it. And so the psalm itself, read that way, becomes God's promise of the fulfillment of every knee will bow and every tongue confess that Jesus is Lord.
Lord,
And a
right.
fulfillment of Isaiah
Mm-hmm.
2, where all the nations come to Mount Zion. So, we should read it like that, and we should take encouragement. We should go, you know, there is no Christian nation except for the church. And that Christian
Right.
nation is persecuted to some extent everywhere. And because the Lord delights in ironic reversals, that situation will reverse in his providence, where the nations
Amen.
come into Zion. So, so we want to take courage. That's why we send missionaries, because we know this will happen. We send missionaries to other countries because we know that beyond the persecution and beyond the hard times, the Lord will convert those nations.
Right.
And so, yeah, and the kingdom will be full, and God's glory will cover the earth like the waters cover the sea, right? Book of Isaiah.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it hasn't happened yet, but it's way closer now than it was, not just time-wise, but geographically. Christians are everywhere, not like in the first
Mm-hmm.
century, right? Not like in the time of Isaiah, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the first
Yeah.
century, they were in a relatively small part of the world. Even at the end of the first century, even though they'd gone over all the known Roman world at the time, it still isn't to the extent what we have today. So, so the Lord is bringing these things to pass. So anyway, thank you, Catherine, for bringing up that psalm. It's a wonderful psalm.
You're welcome.
Yep. I'm going to turn off the recording.